A bedtime story about the entire history of computers in a very, very large world. So large that no one had ever seen the end of it. So large that even the fastest bird could fly for 100 years and never reach the edge. So large that if you started walking when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and kept walking until the first humans lit a fire, you would still be nowhere close to the other side. There lived a tiny grain of sand. It was smaller than a speck of dust floating in a sunbeam. It was smaller than a freckle on a ladybug's back. It was smaller than the period at the end of the sentence. If you took a single hair from your head and split it into 1,000 tiny pieces, and then took one of those pieces and split it into another 1,000 pieces, each of those pieces would still be bigger than this little grain of sand. It was so small that you could fit 1,000,000 of them on the head of a pin, with room left over for a picnic and a game of tag. But this was no ordinary grain of sand. This was a grain of silicon. Now, you might think that all sand is the same. You might think that a beach is just a beach, and a grain of sand is just a grain of sand, and there's nothing special about any of it. But that would be like saying all books are the same because they all have pages and ink. That would be like saying all stars are the same because they all twinkle in the night sky. That would be like saying all people are the same because they all have 2 eyes and a nose. And we know that isn't true, don't we? Every book tells a different story. Every star has a different temperature and a different color and a different song that it sings to the universe. Every person has a different laugh and a different dream and a different way of loving the world. And every grain of sand is different too, if you look closely enough with a very, very good microscope. This particular grain of silicon was special because it had a secret. A secret that not even the other grains of sand knew. It could dream every night, when the moon climbed up the sky and tucked the stars into their blankets of cloud, the little grain would lie there on the warm sand, surrounded by billions of its cousins, and it would whisper to itself. "I wish I could count," it would whisper, so quietly that only the night breeze could hear. "I wish I could remember things. I wish I could talk to my friends who live far, far away. I wish I could help people. I wish I could be part of something bigger than myself." The other grains of sand didn't understand. They were happy just being sand. They liked the feeling of the sun on their tiny backs in the morning, when the beach was still cool from the night before. They liked the whoosh of the waves washing over them, lifting them up and setting them down again, like a gentle game of hide and seek. They liked the seagulls crying overhead and the crabs scuttling sideways across the beach, leaving little tracks that looked like tiny calligraphy. They liked the children building castles and the old people sitting on blankets and the dogs running into the water with their tongues hanging out. What more could you want? They asked. We are sand. Sand doesn't count. Sand doesn't remember. Sand doesn't talk. Sand just is. Sand just sits here and lets the world happen around it. That's our job. That's our purpose. Why would you want to be anything else? But the little grain couldn't help itself. It had a restless heart. Not a real heart, of course. It was a grain of sand, and grains of sand don't have hearts. But if it had a heart, that heart would have been restless. At night, when the beach was quiet and the only sound was the gentle shush-shush of the waves pulling the pebbles back and forth, it would stare up at the stars and wonder, Out there, it thought, out there in the world, there must be more. There must be counting and remembering and talking. There must be things that are alive and things that think and things that create. There must be music and paintings and stories and inventions. There must be people who wake up in the morning with ideas buzzing in their heads like bees in a garden. And maybe, just maybe, I could become one of them. Maybe I could be part of that. Maybe a tiny grain of sand from a quiet beach could help build something extraordinary. One night, a wise old piece of driftwood washed up on the shore. It had traveled across the entire ocean. It had seen cities and ships and whales and storms. It had been a tree once, growing tall and strong in a forest somewhere far away, and before that a seed, no bigger than a fingernail, and before that a dream inside a flower. The driftwood was old and silver-gray, worn smooth by the water and the wind, and it had stories to tell. Stories that would take 100 nights to finish. Stories about icebergs and tropical islands and pirates and philosophers and little fish that glowed in the dark. The little grain of sand asked the driftwood, "Old one, you have seen so much. You have traveled farther than any of us could ever imagine. Tell me, please tell me, can a grain of sand ever learn to think?" The driftwood was quiet for a long, long time. The waves lapped at its sides, whispering secrets to the shore. The moon moved across the sky, slow and patient, like a great white turtle swimming through the dark. A shooting star traced a brief bright line above them and disappeared. The driftwood sighed, a long, creaky, wooden sigh that smelled of salt and cedar and distant lands. Finally, it spoke. "I don't know," it said. "I am old, but I am not all-knowing. I have seen many things, but I have not seen everything. But I have heard a rumor. Far from here, across mountains and deserts and rivers and oceans, there is a building made of glass and steel. Inside that building, there is a man with kind eyes and white hair as soft as dandelion fluff. His name is Gordon Moore, and he believes that everything, even sand, even the smallest grain of silicon, can be taught to think. He believes that the stuff of beaches and deserts and riverbeds can become the stuff of minds. If you want to find out if that is true, you must leave this beach. You must travel to the place where the humans make their magic." "How do I get there?" asked the little grain, trembling with hope and fear all at once. "I am so small. The world is so big. The wind could blow me anywhere. The rain could wash me into a puddle. A bird could eat me without even noticing I was there. How can a tiny grain of sand find its way across the world?" "Wait," said the driftwood. "Wait for the wind. Wait for the right moment. And then let go." So the little grain waited. It waited through summer storms, when the sky turned green and purple and the rain came down in sheets so thick you couldn't see the ocean from the beach. It waited through winter freezes, when the sand turned hard and cold and the waves wore crowns of ice. It waited through spring blossoms, when the flowers on the cliffs above the beach opened their petals to the sun and filled the air with sweetness. It waited through autumn leaves, when the wind carried the smell of wood smoke and apples and the geese flew south in great V-shaped squadrons. It waited so long that it almost forgot what it was waiting for. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years. The little grain watched other grains come and go. Some were carried away by children in buckets. Some were swept out to sea by the tide. Some were buried deep under new layers of sand and never saw the sun again. But the little grain held on. It held on to the beach with everything it had, because the driftwood had said to wait, and the driftwood was wise, and waiting was the only thing the little grain could do. And then, one day, a great wind came, not a gentle breeze that tickles your cheeks and makes the flags flutter. Not a playful gust that spins the windmills and chases the leaves down the street. No, this was a roaring, howling, screaming, powerful wind. A wind that shook the trees and rattled the windows and turned the ocean white with foam. This was the kind of wind that lifts roofs off barns and throws them into the next county. The kind of wind that makes grown men run for cover and ships turn back to harbor. And it picked up the sand and threw it into the air like confetti at the biggest party the world had ever seen. The little grain held on as tight as it could, pressing itself against a piece of shell, digging into the sand beneath it, trying to stay. But the wind was too strong. It was like trying to hold onto the ground while a giant vacuum cleaner sucks the whole world away. "Let go!" screamed the driftwood, its voice barely audible over the roar. "This is your moment. This is what you've been waiting for. Let go and trust the wind." And the little grain let go. It flew higher and higher, tumbling end over end, spinning through the air like a tiny planet orbiting an invisible sun. It flew over beaches and cliffs, over forests and rivers, over highways and houses, over farms and factories, over towns and cities. It flew so far that the beach became a distant memory, a thin white line against the blue of the ocean. It flew so far that the ocean itself became a blue patch on a green and brown world. It flew so far that the little grain lost track of time. Was it minutes or hours or days? And simply surrendered to the wind, letting it carry the grain wherever it wanted to go. Finally, the wind died down. The roaring faded to a howl. The howl faded to a moan. The moan faded to a whisper, and the whisper faded to silence. The little grain floated gently down, 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 spinning lazily like a snowflake in slow motion, until it landed on something soft and warm. It was a windowsill, and through the window, the little grain could see a room. It was a strange room, filled with strange machines. There were glowing screens that flickered with green text and blinking lights that winked like fireflies. There were wires running everywhere, snaking across the floor and up the walls and dangling from the ceiling like vines in a jungle. There were magnifying glasses and microscopes and soldering irons and oscilloscopes and tools that the little grain couldn't even name, tools with dials and buttons and knobs and levers, tools that hummed and clicked and beeped. There were whiteboards covered in equations and diagrams, and bulletin boards covered in notes and photographs, and bookshelves covered in thick technical manuals with titles that would make your head spin. And in the middle of it all, sitting on a tall stool with his elbows on a workbench and his chin in his hands, was a man. The man had kind eyes. They were not just any kind of kind eyes. They were the kind of kind eyes that looked at the world and saw not what it was, but what it could be. They were the kind of eyes that see possibilities where other people see dead ends. The kind of eyes that look at a pile of junk and see a spaceship, that look at a patch of dirt and see a garden, that look at a grain of sand and see a thinking machine. He had white hair, soft as dandelion fluff, The kind of white hair that comes from a life of thinking hard and dreaming big and never quite remembering to comb it. He wore round glasses that magnified his eyes just a little, making him look like a friendly owl who knows all the secrets of the forest. He was staring at a thin, shiny circle. It was no bigger than a fingernail, and it glittered in the light like a tiny mirror. It was a color that had no name, not quite silver, not quite gray, not quite blue, but something in between, something that seemed to hold all the colors of a rainy day. "That's me," whispered the little grain of sand, pressing itself against the glass of the window. "That's Silicon. He's looking at my cousin." The man's name was Gordon Moore, and he was about to change the world. Gordon picked up the shiny circle and held it close to his face, turning it this way and that, letting the light play across its surface. He had a magnifying lamp, a big round light with a glass lens in the middle, and he leaned into it, squinting through his glasses, examining something on the surface of the chip. And there, so small that the little grain of sand could barely see it even with a magnifying lamp, was something extraordinary. It looked like a tiny door, or a bridge, or a gate. It was made of metal and silicon and other mysterious materials, and it was connected to other tiny doors by paths so thin they were almost invisible. The little grain had never seen anything like it. It was like finding a tiny cathedral built by microscopic monks, or a little city designed by the smallest architects who ever lived. "What is that?" asked the little grain, not really expecting an answer. But as luck would have it, there was a scientist in a white coat standing nearby. The scientist was younger than Gordon, with dark hair and a serious expression, and he was scribbling notes on a clipboard. He heard Gordon's thoughts, or rather, he heard Gordon mumbling to himself, which was pretty much the same thing, and he looked up. "That's a transistor," the scientist said, answering Gordon's mumble as much as the little grain's question. "It's like a switch. It can be open or closed, on or off, yes or no. That's all it does. That's all it can ever do. Open or closed, on or off, yes or no." Gordon Moore smiled. It was a gentle smile, the kind that makes you feel safe and curious at the same time, like when a grandparent tells you that it's okay to ask questions, even the hard ones, even the ones that don't have answers. "And if we put enough of these switches together," he said, "they can do more than just switch on and off. They can count. They can remember. They can think." "How many do you have on that chip?" someone asked. Maybe the young scientist, maybe someone else. The little grain couldn't tell. Gordon pushed his glasses up on his nose, a habit he had when he was about to say something important. 30, he said. He said it with such pride that you would have thought he had just discovered a new continent, or painted the Sistine Chapel, or climbed the highest mountain in the world in his bare feet. 30 transistors. That might not sound like very many, especially compared to the billions we have today. 30 is just a little more than the number of fingers and toes you have, plus a few extra. You could count to 30 in less than half a minute. You could draw 30 dots on a piece of paper and they wouldn't even fill one line. But in the year 1965, which as far as sand is concerned is practically yesterday, the blink of an eye in geological time, the equivalent of about a second in the life of a mountain, 30 transistors on a single chip was a miracle. No one had ever done it before. No one had even thought it was possible. Gordon Moore and his team at Fairchild Semiconductor had pushed the boundaries of what humans could do, had invented new techniques and new materials and new ways of thinking, all to fit 30 tiny switches onto a piece of silicon the size of your pinky nail. The little grain of sand pressed itself against the window, trembling with excitement. This is it, it thought. This is where it begins. But Gordon Moore didn't stop with 30 transistors. He was not the kind of person who does one amazing thing and then sits back and rests on his laurels. He was the kind of person who does one amazing thing and then immediately starts wondering how to do an even more amazing thing. He had a much bigger idea, an idea so big that it barely fit inside his head, so big that it made his colleagues laugh and shake their heads when he first told them about it. One afternoon in 1965, Gordon sat down at his desk with a piece of paper and a pen. The paper was yellow, not pale yellow like a lemon, but the deep, rich yellow of a dandelion or a school bus, the kind of yellow that scientists like to scribble on because it makes their equations look more important. The pen was black and a little chewed at the end, because Gordon had a habit of nibbling on his pens when he was thinking, which was almost always. Outside his window, the sun was setting over the hills of California, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that would make a painter weep with envy. The hills were golden with summer grass, dotted with oak trees and the first twinkling lights of houses just beginning to wake up to the evening. Gordon started to draw. He drew a line that went up and to the right, climbing steadily like a path up a gentle mountain. Then he labeled the bottom of the graph time, and the side of the graph number of transistors. He marked the years along the bottom, 1960, 1965, 1970, 1975, and he marked the numbers along the side, 1, 10, 100, 1000, 10,000. Then he plotted the data. The chips they had made in 1960 had about 10 transistors. The chips they had made in 1965 had about 30. And then he drew a line continuing into the future, up and to the right, up and to the right, up and to the right, and he wrote something that would become famous. He wrote, "The complexity for minimum component costs has increased at a rate of roughly a factor of 2 per year." That was the original version. Later he would refine it, change it to every 2 years, adjust it based on new data and new understanding. But the meaning was the same. Every year, or every 2 years, depending on how you measured it, we will be able to put twice as many transistors on the same size chip. Twice as many. Double. Think about that for a moment. If you had one cookie, and someone said, "Every 2 years I will double your cookies," after 2 years you'd have 2 cookies. That's not very exciting. 2 cookies are barely enough for a snack. After 4 years, you'd have 4 cookies. After 6 years, 8 cookies. After 8 years, 16 cookies. After 10 years, 30. 2 cookies. That doesn't sound so impressive, does it? A few dozen cookies. You could eat them all in an afternoon, and then you'd have a stomachache and nothing to show for it. But here's the thing about doubling. It starts slow. It starts so slow that you barely notice it. And then, suddenly, it explodes after 20 years. 1,024 cookies. That's enough to share with your whole class. After 30 years, 32,768 cookies. That's enough to fill your entire bedroom. After 40 years, over 1 million cookies. That's enough to fill a swimming pool, a big one, Olympic-sized, with room for cannonballs and synchronized swimming. After 50 years, over 33 million cookies. That's enough to build a house made of cookies, a cookie cottage like the one in Hansel and Gretel, but much, much bigger. After 60 years, over 1 billion cookies. 1 billion cookies. That's enough to fill a stadium. Enough to feed a small country. Enough to stretch from New York to Los Angeles if you laid them end to end, which you shouldn't do because then they'd get all crumbly, and that's just cookies. Now imagine it's not cookies. Imagine it's not something you ate and forget about. Imagine it's thinking power. The ability to solve problems. The ability to remember information. The ability to create pictures and sounds and stories. The ability to play games and write poems and find cures for diseases. Doubling every 2 years for 50 years. That's what Gordon Moore was predicting when he showed his graph to his colleagues at Fairchild Semiconductor. Some of them nodded thoughtfully. They could see the pattern. They could see that it had been true so far, more or less. But others shook their heads. Impossible, they said. You'll hit a wall. You'll run out of room. You can't just keep making things smaller forever. At some point, the laws of physics will stop you. You can't make a transistor smaller than an atom, Gordon. You can't cheat reality. There are limits. Gordon Moore just smiled. It was the same gentle, curious, slightly mischievous smile that had greeted the little grain of sand at the window. Maybe, he said. Maybe there are limits. Maybe we'll hit a wall someday. But let's try anyway. Let's see how far we can go. Let's keep doubling until we can't double anymore. And then let's figure out a way to double anyway. The little grain of sand, pressed against the windowsill, whispered, I want to help. Now, my dear sleepy friend, I need you to do something for me. I need you to close your eyes. Not all the way, just most of the way. Leave them open just a crack, so you can still see the light of the moon or the glow of your nightlight or the soft golden warmth of the lamp beside your bed. But let them get heavy. Let them get droopy. Let them feel like 2 sleepy turtles crawling under their shells, tucking their little heads in for a long winter nap. Let your eyelids be like curtains slowly closing on a stage, where the play is almost over and the actors are taking their final bows. Are they closed? Just a crack open? Good. Now imagine you are shrinking. Not a little bit. A lot. You are shrinking smaller than a mouse, smaller than a flea, smaller than a mite. You are shrinking smaller than a single cell, the kind that makes up your skin and your bones and your blood. You are shrinking smaller than a bacterium, those tiny creatures that live everywhere and do everything. You are shrinking smaller than a virus, so small that you could ride on the back of a flu bug like a cowgirl on a bronco. You are shrinking until you are no bigger than the little grain of sand itself, until you are a tiny speck in a world of tiny specks, and when you open your eyes, your real eyes, the ones inside your imagination, you see something amazing die in front of you, glowing with a warm golden light like the sun coming through honey, is a city. But it's not like any city you've ever seen. The buildings are so tiny that millions of them could fit on the tip of a pencil, and not just the tip. You could fit them on the little graphite point that actually touches the paper. The streets are so narrow that you have to walk sideways, 1 foot in front of the other like a tightrope walker over Niagara Falls. And the lights, oh, the lights, they blink and flash in patterns so fast that your eyes can barely follow them, like fireflies having a dance party, like lightning bugs in a race. This is Processor City. And it is alive, not alive like a puppy or a flower. Not alive in a way that feels pain or joy or loneliness or excitement. Not alive like you are alive, with your beating heart and your breathing lungs and your dreaming brain. But alive in a way that works. A way that thinks. A way that creates. A way that takes the raw stuff of the universe, electricity, silicon, copper, light, and turns it into something that has never existed before. Everywhere you look, there are little creatures running back and forth. They are smaller than you, much smaller, so small that you have to squint to see them clearly. They move with such speed and purpose that they seem like a blur, like the wheels of a race car or the wings of a hummingbird. They carry tiny lanterns that flash red or blue, over and over. They shout messages to each other in voices so high and so fast that human ears can't hear them. A constant chatter of yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no that sounds like the buzzing of 1,000 bees. These are the transistors. They are the workers of Processor City. And there are billions of them. Let me tell you about these little workers. In Processor City, there are 2 kinds of workers. There are the reds, and there are the blues. The reds are short and round, with little red hats that look like tiny mushrooms and little red shoes that squeak when they walk. They bounce when they move, like rubber balls on a playground, like popcorn in a popper. Their job is to say yes. That's all they know how to say. They can't say maybe, or perhaps, or let me think about it, or I'll get back to you on that. They can't say we'll see, or it depends, or ask me tomorrow. They can only say yes, loud and clear, with all their little red hearts, bouncing up and down with the effort of it. Yes, yes, yes. The blues are tall and thin, with blue stripes on their arms like pajamas and blue bells on their toes that jingle when they glide. They glide when they walk, like ice skaters on a frozen pond, like ghosts in a haunted house. Their job is to say no. That's all they know how to say. They can't say sometimes, or usually, or most of the time, or except when it's raining. They can only say no, firm and final, like a door closing, like a judge's gavel coming down. No, no, and no. Now you might think that creatures who can only say 2 words, yes and no, wouldn't be very useful. You might think that they couldn't do much more than a parrot or a talking doll or one of those little plastic toys that says I love you when you squeeze its hand. You might think that a city full of creatures who only say yes and no would be a very boring place, like being stuck in an elevator with 2 people who only know 1 word each. But you would be wrong. You would be so wrong that you couldn't be more wrong if you tried. Because when you put millions of reds and blues together, and then billions of billions, and you let them run around in patterns, and you let them say yes and no in a specific order, at a specific speed, in a specific arrangement, well, they can do anything. Do you want to add 2 numbers? The reds and blues arrange themselves in a pattern. Red says yes, blue says no. Red says yes, Red says yes, and somehow, magically, mysteriously, wonderfully, the answer appears. 2 plus 2 equals 4. 17 plus 35 equals 52. 1492 plus 8743 equals 10,235. The reds and blues don't know what numbers are. They don't know what adding means. They just say yes and no in the right order, and the answer is there. Like pulling a rabbit out of a hat to do. You want to remember your best friend's phone number? The reds and blues line up in a long, long row, stretching across Processor City like a parade. Each yes is a 1, each no is a 0. The pattern of ones and zeros spells out the number 555, 1234, or whatever it is, and there it stays, locked in their memory, etched into the city itself, until you need it again. They don't forget. They never forget. They hold on to that number forever, or until you tell them to let it go. Or you want to play a video game with colorful graphics and thumping music and characters that run and jump and shoot and dance. Millions and millions of reds and blues start running. They say yes and no so fast, billions of times per second, trillions of times per second, that they create whole worlds on your screen. Worlds with mountains and rivers, with forests and deserts, with castles and caves, with monsters and heroes, with sunsets and rainbows and shooting stars. They create sounds that make you tap your feet and melodies that get stuck in your head for days. They create stories that make you laugh and cry and cheer and gasp. And the most wonderful part? The reds and blues never get tired. They never need to sleep, not even a little nap. They never ask for a raise or a day off or a better parking spot. They never call in sick with a headache or a stomachache or a case of the Mondays. They never complain about the temperature or the lighting or the music. They just run and run and run, saying yes and no, yes and no, yes no yes and no, from the moment you turn on your device until the moment you turn it off. They are the hardest workers in the universe. They make ants look lazy. They make bees look like they're taking a vacation. At the very center of Processor City, there is a tall tower. It's made of crystal and light, and it rises up and up and up, higher than any building in the city, so high that you have to crane your neck to see the top. At the very top of the tower, there is a great clock. This clock doesn't look like the clocks in your house. It doesn't have numbers or hands or a little pendulum that swings back and forth. It doesn't go tick-tock in the slow, sleepy way that clocks on mantelpieces go. Instead, it has a heart made of quartz, the same kind of crystal that some watches use, the same kind of crystal that grows in the ground like a flower made of rock. And this quartz heart vibrates. It shakes. It trembles. It pulses with a steady, unchanging rhythm that never speeds up and never slows down, like a drumbeat played by a robot. Tick, that's the sound it makes. Tick, tick, tick. A sharp, clean, precise sound, like a tiny hammer striking a tiny bell. Every time the clock ticks, the reds and blues take one step. They move forward one tiny distance. They say their word, yes or no, depending on what they're supposed to say. And then they wait for the next tick. Tick. Yes. Tick. No. Tick. Yes, yes, no. Tick, tick, tick. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. The faster the clock ticks, the faster the reds and blues can work. And the clock in Processor City ticks very, very, very fast indeed. How fast? Let me try to explain. When you snap your fingers, like this, snap, that takes about 1/10 of a second. In that 1/10 of a second, the clock in a modern Processor City ticks about 300 million times. 300 million. That's more than the number of people in the United States. That's more than the number of stars you can see on a clear night. In the time it takes you to snap your fingers, the clock ticks 300 million times, and the reds and blues take 300 million steps in the time it takes you to blink your eyes. About 1/3 of a second, the clock ticks 1 billion times. 1 billion. That's the number of seconds in about 31 years. That's the number of grains of sand on a typical beach. You could blink your eyes 100 times in a minute, and every single time, the clock would tick 1 billion times without missing a beat in the time it takes you to say the word hello, about 1 second. The clock ticks 3 billion times. That's so many ticks that you couldn't count them if you started when you were born and counted every second of every day, without stopping to eat or sleep or go to school, until you were 100 years old. You would still be nowhere close. You would still be counting when your great-great-grandchildren were old and gray. The clock ticks so fast that the reds and blues don't even feel like individuals anymore. They lose themselves in the rhythm. They become part of something larger. They feel like a single flowing river of yes and no, a waterfall of information, a symphony of switches, a chorus of calculation. They are 1 billion voices singing one song, 1 billion feet dancing one dance, 1 billion hearts beating one rhythm, and the conductor of this symphony is Mrs. CU, the control unit. Let me introduce you to some of the important citizens of Processor City. You should know their names and their jobs, because they are the ones who make the magic happen. First, there is Mrs. CU. Her full name is much longer, Central Control Unit, if you want to be formal, or sometimes just the controller if you're in a hurry. But everyone who lives in Processor City calls her Mrs. CU. She is tall and thin, with sharp, intelligent eyes that miss nothing. Not a single yes, not a single no, not a single misplaced step. She wears a black dress with silver buttons that go all the way down the front, and on her feet she wears sensible black shoes that don't make any noise when she walks. In her hand, she holds a little white baton, just like the conductor of an orchestra, just like the leader of a marching band. Mrs. CU stands on a high podium at the very center of Processor City. From there, she can see everything. She can see the reds running in their red shoes. She can see the blues gliding in their blue stripes. She can see the streets and the buildings and the library and the post office and the power plant and the clock tower. She can see all the way to the edges of the city, where the roads turn into fields and the fields turn into the unknown, and she waves her baton left, and the reds turn left. Right, and the blues turn right. Up, and they look up. Down, and they look down. A little circle, and they spin in place like tops. A sharp flick, and they stop where they are, frozen like statues. A gentle wave, and they start again, flowing like water. But Mrs. CU doesn't just wave her baton randomly. She doesn't wake up in the morning and think, I think I'll make the reds go left today, just for fun. No, no, no. Mrs. CU follows a set of instructions, a program, a recipe, a plan, that tells her exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. The program might say, first, make the reds and blues add these two numbers. Then, make them compare the answer to this third number. Then, if the answer is bigger, send it over to the library for safekeeping. If the answer is smaller, send it to the post office to be mailed away. If the answer is the same, make them do a little dance and start over. And Mrs. CU does all of this, all of it, every step, every instruction, every decision, in less time than it takes a hummingbird to flap its wings. A hummingbird flaps its wings about 80 times per second. Did you know that? That's fast. That's really, really fast. But Mrs. CU is faster. She is so fast that the hummingbird looks like it's standing still. She is so fast that Lie itself, the fastest thing in the universe, has to hurry to keep up. Without Mrs. CU, the reds and blues would just bump into each other. They would wander around aimlessly, saying yes and no to no one, accomplishing nothing, like a classroom full of kindergartners with no teacher. They would form crowds and then disband. They would make patterns and then lose them. They would be chaos, not order. But Mrs. CU gives them purpose. She gives them direction. She gives them order. She turns a crowd of shouting, bouncing, gliding creatures into a thinking machine. Next to Mrs. CU stands Mr. ALU, the arithmetic logic unit. Everyone calls him Al. He is round and jolly, with rosy cheeks that look like apples and a big white apron that says "Kiss the Cook" in red letters. On his head, he wears a tall chef's hat, the kind that puffs up like a cloud, and in his hand, he carries a large wooden spoon that has been worn smooth by years of stirring. Mr. ALU doesn't cook food. He cooks numbers. Imagine a giant pot on a giant stove. The pot is so big that you could take a bath in it. The stove is so hot that you could fry an egg from 10 feet away. And inside the pot, numbers swirl and mix and combine like ingredients in a soup. Whole numbers and fractions, positive numbers and negative numbers, big numbers and small numbers, all swirling together in a delicious, mathematical stew. Mr. ALU stirs the pot with his spoon. He adds them, stir once, like this. He subtracts them, stir twice, like this. He multiplies them, stir 3 times, around and around. He divides them, stir 4 times, very carefully so that nothing spills over the edge. He also compares them. Is 7 bigger than 5? He asks, peering into the pot. He thinks for a moment, his rosy cheeks puffing out. Yes, he says. 7 is bigger than 5. Is 2 bigger than 9? He looks again. No, he says. 2 is not bigger than 9. Not even close. Whatever the question, whatever the numbers, whatever the problem, Mr. ALU always has an answer. He is the best cook of numbers in the whole world. No one can add faster than Mr. ALU. No one can subtract more accurately. No one can multiply or divide with such grace and flair. If you need a problem solved, any problem that involves numbers, from what is 2 plus 2 to what is the square root of 1,234,567,890, Mr. ALU is your guy. He will stir his pot, and the answer will appear, but Mr. ALU can't work alone. Even the best chef needs helpers. He needs creatures who can hold on to numbers for a moment while he's stirring the pot, so he doesn't forget them. He needs creatures who can run back and forth between the pot and the pantry, bringing ingredients when he needs them and taking away the finished dishes. He needs assistants, sous chefs, kitchen helpers. These helpers are called the registers. The registers are small, quick children, boys and girls with backpacks and bright eyes and legs that never seem to get tired. They have the hardest job in Processor City, because they have to remember things perfectly, but only for a very short time. Imagine that Mr. ALU is cooking a complicated recipe. First, he needs to add 7 and 3. That's easy. The answer is 10. But then he needs to multiply that 10 by 5. If he forgets the 10 while he's getting the 5, he'll have to start all over again. He'll have to add 7 and 3 again, which doesn't take long, but if he had to do that for every step of every calculation, he'd never get anything done, so the registers hold on to the numbers for him. Register A says, "I've got the 10 right here in my backpack. Safe and sound." Register B says, "I've got the 5 in my backpack. Ready when you need it." And Mr. ALU can take them out whenever he needs them, use them, and put them back. He can swap them between registers, combine them, split them apart. He can say, "Register A, give me that 10. Register B, give me that 5. Now, Register C, hold on to the answer, 50. And the registers do it all, instantly, without complaint, without hesitation. The registers are like sticky notes on a refrigerator. They don't remember things for a long time, just a few seconds at most, just long enough for Mr. ALU to finish his calculation. They don't hold on to your photos or your messages or your game saves. That's not their job. But they remember things instantly, without any delay. When Mr. ALU says, "Give me that 10, Register pulls it out of her backpack so fast you can't even see her hand move. It's there before the words are finished leaving his mouth. There are usually about 16 or 32 registers in a typical processor city. That might not sound like many, but they are very, very fast, and they work very, very hard. They are the unsung heroes of the city, the ones who make sure that the calculations keep flowing, that the numbers keep moving, that the thinking never stops. Beyond the registers, deeper in Processor City, there is a magnificent building. It has marble columns and arched windows and a great bronze door that gleams in the light. Above the door, carved in stone, are the words, "The Cache Library, fastest memory in the city." Inside the Cache Library, there are millions of little drawers. Each drawer is no bigger than a thimble, the kind that your grandmother uses to protect her finger when she's sewing. And inside each drawer, there is a single piece of information. A number, a letter, a color, a sound, a tiny piece of a picture, a single pixel of a video game, a single note of a song. The Cache Library is special because it's fast. Very, very fast. Not as fast as the registers. Nothing is as fast as the registers, but faster than anything else in the city. When a red or a blue needs something, let's say the color of the sky in a video game, or the sound of a door slamming, or the answer to a math problem that was solved 5 minutes ago. They can run to the library, find the right drawer, and grab the information in less than a heartbeat. They don't have to wait in line. They don't have to fill out forms. They just run in, find the drawer, grab what they need, and run back out. It's like having a library where every book is already open to the right page, and the librarian knows exactly where you are and what you need before you even ask. But even the cache library isn't big enough for everything. It's fast, but it's small. It can only hold a few million pieces of information at a time, which sounds like a lot, but when you're running a video game or a web browser or a word processor, you need billions and billions of pieces of information. The cache library is like your desk at school. It's where you keep the things you're working on right now, the things you need to reach quickly. But you can't keep everything on your desk. Your whole life wouldn't fit on your desk. Your books and your papers and your lunch and your photos and your homework from last year. It would be a huge mess so beyond the cache library. Farther away, on the other side of Processor City, there is an even bigger library. This library is enormous, as big as a mountain, as wide as a valley. It has millions and millions of shelves, and on each shelf, millions and millions of books, and in each book, millions and millions of words. This is the main memory. The main memory is where all the long-term information is stored. Your photos, your messages, your apps, your games, your homework, your music, your videos. Everything you've ever saved on your device lives in the main memory, tucked away on a shelf, waiting for you to need it again, but the main memory is slower. Much slower. You see, the main memory is far away from the center of the city, where Mrs. CU waves her baton and Mr. ALU stirs his pot. The reds and blues have to travel a long way to get there. Not long in human terms, of course, but long in processor terms. A trip to the main memory might take 100 clock ticks, or even 200. And while they're gone, Mrs. CU has to wait. She can't do anything else until they come back with the information she needs. That's why the cache library exists. It's a compromise, a middle ground. It's not as small as the registers, and it's not as far away as the main memory. It sits right in the middle, close enough to be fast, big enough to be useful. When the reds and blues need something, they check the cache library first. If it's there, if the information is already in one of those tiny thimble-sized drawers, they grab it and go, and everyone is happy. If it's not there, then they have to make the long journey to the main memory, and Mrs. CU taps her foot impatiently and wishes they would hurry up. Together, Mrs. CU waving her baton, Mr. ALU stirring his pot, the registers holding their numbers, the cache library keeping its fast drawers, the main memory storing everything else, and the billions of reds and blues running and shouting yes and no. Together, they make up a thinking machine. A computer. A brain made of sand. Now let me tell you about the first big adventure that the little grain of sand went on. For many years after Gordon Moore made his prediction, processor cities lived only in big, expensive buildings. They were huge, so huge that they filled entire rooms, entire floors, entire buildings. They had their own air conditioners that hummed and whirred day and night, keeping them cool. They had special raised floors with cables running underneath like roots. They had technicians in white coats who walked around with clipboards and worried expressions. checking dials and flipping switches and muttering to themselves. Only big companies and universities and governments could afford them. Ordinary people never got to see a processor city up close. They read about them in newspapers, maybe, or saw pictures in magazines. But they never touched one. They never had one in their own home. But then, a man named Steve and a man named Was had an idea. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were two friends who liked to tinker. Wozniak was the engineer. He loved building things, taking them apart, figuring out how they worked. He could look at a pile of electronic components and see a computer in his head, complete and perfect, before he had even soldered the first wire. He was the kind of person who could fix anything, build anything, improve anything. Jobs was the dreamer. He loved design, beauty, the way things looked and felt in your hand. He could look at a boring gray box and see a work of art. He could look at a complicated machine and see something that anyone could use, even a child, even a grandmother, even someone who had never seen a computer before. Together, they made a perfect team. Was built the guts, and Jobs built the soul point one day. Wozniak built a small processor city on a single board. It wasn't powerful, not compared to the giant, room-sized computers that filled university basements and government laboratories. It had only a few thousand transistors, a tiny fraction of what the big computers had. But it was small. It could sit on a desk. It didn't need a special air conditioner or a raised floor or a technician in a white coat. And it was cheap enough, or at least, it could be cheap enough, that a regular person might be able to buy one. This could be a computer for everyone, Jobs said, his eyes shining. Not just for scientists and engineers. For kids. For artists. For grandparents. For anyone who wants to create something. For anyone who has a dream. People laughed at them. A computer on a desk, they said. What would anyone do with that? Computers are for serious work, for calculating missile trajectories and predicting the weather and breaking enemy codes. Not for writing letters or drawing pictures or playing games. That's ridiculous. That's a toy. That's a waste of good silicon. But Steve and Steve didn't listen. They built their computer anyway. They called it the Apple II. They gave it a case that was smooth and beige and pleasant to look at, not an ugly metal box. They gave it a keyboard that clicked satisfyingly when you pressed the keys. They gave it color graphics, real colors, not just black and white, so that you could draw pictures and play games in rainbow hues. They made it so that you could plug in a cassette recorder and save your work, and plug in a printer and print out your letters, and plug in a joystick and fly spaceships across the screen, and something amazing happened. People loved it. They loved that they could type letters and print them out, instead of writing them by hand or using a clunky typewriter that smudged the ink. They loved that they could draw simple pictures on the screen, blocky, pixelated pictures with jagged edges and strange colors, but pictures that they had made themselves, with their own hands. They loved that they could play games, simple games with beeping sounds and bouncing balls and little characters that walked across the screen, but games that made them smile and laugh and shout with excitement. They loved that the computer sat right there on their desk, waiting for them, ready to help, a faithful friend that never got tired or bored or grumpy. The Apple II was followed by other personal computers. the IBM PC, the Commodore 64, the Atari 800, the Amiga, the Macintosh. Each one had a more powerful processor city than the last. Each one could do more things, faster and better, with more colors and more sounds and more possibilities. And every 2 years, just as Gordon Moore had predicted, the number of reds and blues inside those computers doubled. And doubled. And doubled again. The little grain of sand, which had once been just one among billions on a quiet beach, was now at the heart of a revolution. It was helping people write books and compose music and design buildings and send messages across the world. It was helping children learn their ABCs and adults balance their checkbooks and scientists analyze their data. It was doing things that would have seemed like pure magic, the kind of magic that only exists in fairy tales and dreams, just 20 years before. And it was just getting started. One of the greatest early examples of this tiny, thinking sand changing the world happened long before the personal computer, though. It happened in the 1960s, when Gordon Moore was still a young man with dark hair and a new idea, when the beach where the little grain had lived was still just a beach, when most people had never even heard the word computer. The United States had decided to do something that had never been done before, something that many people thought was impossible, or foolish, or both. They had decided to send humans to the moon. The mission was called Apollo. The astronauts were brave men, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, and others, who were willing to ride a rocket made of millions of parts, each one built by the lowest bidder, and trust that it wouldn't explode. But bravery wasn't enough. They needed a computer to guide their spaceship, to calculate their trajectory, to make sure they didn't miss the moon or crash into it or fly off into the endless black forever. A computer was essential. Without a computer, they would be lost, but there was a problem. Computers back then were enormous. They were the size of refrigerators. They weighed a ton. They needed their own rooms, their own power supplies, their own cooling systems. You couldn't fit a 1960s computer into a spaceship any more than you could fit an elephant into a showbox. The engineers at NASA scratched their heads and bit their pencils and stayed up late at night, trying to figure out what to do, and then they had an idea. What if they used integrated circuits? What if they used the new chips that Gordon Moore and others were building? Chips with multiple transistors on a single piece of silicon. Those chips were small. They were light. They didn't need much power. They might just fit in a spaceship so they built something called the Apollo Guidance Computer. It was one of the first computers to use integrated circuits. It had about 12,000 transistors, which seems tiny compared to today's billions, which is like comparing a single drop of water to the entire Pacific Ocean. But at the time, it was a miracle. It fit in a small box. It weighed only 70 pounds. It could fit in the palm of your hand if your hand were the size of a small suitcase. That little computer, that little city of reds and blues, guided Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin safely to the moon and back. It calculated their position, their speed, their fuel. It told them when to fire the engines and when to shut them off. It made sure they landed in the right place and took off at the right time and came home to the right ocean. Without that little grain of sand, without the thousands and thousands of reds and blues saying yes and no, over and over, humans would never have walked on another world. The moon would have remained a distant, unreachable dream, a silver coin in the sky that we could only look at and wonder about. One of the astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, later said that the Apollo guidance computer had less computing power than a modern toaster. That's true. Your toaster probably has more transistors than the computer that took humans to the moon. But that doesn't make the Apollo computer less amazing. It makes it more amazing. They did so much with so little. They sent people to the moon with a computer that was weaker than the one in your microwave. That's not a failure. That's a triumph. Another incredible achievement came a few years later. In 1973, a man named Martin Cooper stood on a street in New York City, 6th Avenue, to be exact, between 53rd and 54th Streets. He was wearing a suit and tie, because that's what engineers wore in those days. He was holding a large, brick-like device to his ear. It was beige and brown and looked like something you might use to prop open a door. It weighed 2.5 pounds, about as much as a bag of sugar, and had only 30 minutes of battery life. It cost about $10,000 in today's money, which is more than many cars. Martin Cooper was making the first ever mobile phone call. He called his rival at Bell Labs, a man named Joel Engel. Bell Labs was the giant of the telephone industry, the company that had invented the transistor, the company that everyone thought would be the first to build a mobile phone. But they hadn't. Martin Cooper and his team at Motorola had beaten them. "I'm calling you from a cell phone," Martin Cooper said. "A real, handheld, portable cell phone." And then he laughed. He laughed because he knew the world would never be the same. He knew that phones would never again be tied to walls and wires. He knew that people would be able to talk to each other from anywhere, at any time, without finding a phone booth or a landline. Inside that brick, inside that big, clunky, heavy, expensive brick, there was a tiny processor city. It wasn't very powerful by today's standards. It had only a few thousand transistors. It could barely do more than make a phone call. It couldn't play music or take pictures or connect to the internet. It couldn't even send a text message. But it could do one thing, and it did it well. It turned sound into electrical signals and back again. It took Martin Cooper's voice, broke it into tiny pieces, sent those pieces through the air as invisible radio waves, and then reassembled them in Joel Engel's ear, all in less time than it takes to blink. That little grain of sand inside that brick started a chain of doublings that would eventually put 1,000 times more computing power into a device that fits in your palm and costs a tiny fraction of the price. It started a revolution that would change the way humans communicate, work, play, learn, love, and live. Every smartphone in the world, every iPhone, every Samsung, every Google Pixel, every OnePlus, every Xiaomi, is a descendant of that brick. Every time you make a call or send a text or scroll through Instagram, you are standing on the shoulders of Martin Cooper and his brick. The little grain of sand looked around at all the personal computers sitting on desks in homes and offices and schools, and it felt proud. It felt proud of what it had become. It had started as a tiny speck on a beach, a nothing, a nobody, a grain of sand among billions. And now it was part of something huge, something important, something that was changing the world, but it also felt restless. "I want to go places," it thought. I don't want to stay on a desk forever. I don't want to be stuck in a box that never moves. I want to fit in a pocket. I want to be carried in a hand. I want to go on adventures with people, to the park, to the beach, to the moon. I want to be there when they laugh and cry and discover new things. I want to be a companion, not just a tool. So the engineers got to work again. They had a problem, though. A big problem. A personal computer could be big and heavy. It could have a fan to keep the reds and blues cool, a whirring, buzzing fan that pushed hot air out and pulled cool air in. It could be plugged into a wall socket that gave it all the electricity it could ever want, a never-ending river of power. But a mobile phone had to be small. It had to be light. It had to fit in your hand, not on your desk. It had to run on a tiny battery, smaller than a book of matches, that wouldn't run out after an hour. And it couldn't have a fan. There wasn't room for a fan. There wasn't room for anything except the bare essentials, so the engineers made the reds and blues even smaller. They made them use less electricity, much less, a tiny fraction of what the desktop reds and blues used. They made them run more slowly when the phone didn't need much power, like when it was just waiting for a call, and faster only when it was doing something demanding, like playing a game or loading a website. They taught them how to go to sleep when they weren't being used, curling up in their little beds and snoring softly, and how to wake up again in a fraction of a second when something happened, a phone call, a text message, an alarm, a touch on the screen. The first mobile phones were big and clunky. They looked like bricks, or like the shoes that clowns wear, or like something a soldier might carry into battle. You could barely lift them with one hand. You had to hold them with both hands, like you were holding a sandwich or a small animal. And all they could do was make phone calls. No games. No pictures. No internet. No maps. No music. No videos. Just hello. And can you hear me now? And I'm standing outside the bank. Where are you? But the reds and blues kept shrinking. Every 2 years, they got smaller and smaller. And every 2 years, the phone got smarter and smarter. First, phones learn how to send text messages. The reds and blues loved this, because they loved letters almost as much as they loved numbers. They would take a message like I love you, 3 little words, 8 little letters, and turn each letter into a pattern of yeses and nos. I is this pattern. L is that pattern. O is another pattern. V is another. E is another. Y is another. U is another. They would send those patterns through the air as invisible radio waves, traveling at the speed of light, and then turn them back into letters on the other person's phone. All in less time than it takes to blink. All without a single mistake. I love you became yes, or something like that, and then back into I love you. Again. Magic. Then phones learned how to take pictures. This was harder. Much harder. A picture is made of millions of tiny dots called pixels. Pixels that are so small you can't see them individually, but when you put them all together, they make an image. Each pixel has a color: red, green, blue, or some mixture of them. To capture a picture, the reds and blues have to measure the light coming into the camera, measure it very precisely, and turn each measurement into a number. Then they have to store all those numbers in memory, millions of numbers, millions of them, and then later, when you want to see the picture, they have to turn them back into colors on the screen. Red pixel here, blue pixel there, green pixel over there, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times. The first camera phones took terrible pictures. They were blurry and grainy and dark, like something you might see in a dream that you're trying to forget. You could barely tell what you were looking at. But as the reds and blues multiplied, as Moore's law did its work, doubling and doubling and doubling, the pictures got better. 2 megapixels, 5 megapixels, 12 megapixels, 50 megapixels, 100 megapixels. Today, a phone can take a picture that is sharper and clearer than what professional photographers used just a few years ago. Pictures that show every eyelash, every freckle, every dewdrop on a flower, every grain of sand on a beach. Here's a famous story about the first picture ever taken with a camera phone. It was 1997. A man named Philippe Kahn was in a hospital in Santa Cruz, California. His wife had just given birth to their daughter, Sophie. Philippe wanted to share the moment instantly, right now, this second, not after he went home and developed the film and mailed the pictures. So he cobbled together a digital camera, a mobile phone, and a laptop. He wrote some software. He connected some wires. And he sent the picture, a grainy, low-resolution image of a newborn baby girl, red and wrinkled and perfect, to more than 2,000 people around the world. That was the first photo ever shared wirelessly. Today, billions of people take and share photos every single day. Selfies and sunsets and birthday parties and cat videos and funny signs and beautiful flowers and adorable babies. All of it, started with that one grainy picture of Sophie Kahn. And all of it was made possible by the little grain of sand that kept doubling. Then phones learned how to connect to the internet. This was the biggest change of all. Bigger than text messages, bigger than cameras, bigger than anything that had come before. Suddenly, your phone wasn't just a phone. It was a window into the entire world. You could look up anything. You could learn anything. You could talk to anyone. You could watch videos from the other side of the planet, videos of pandas playing, of volcanoes erupting, of astronauts floating in space. You could buy things and sell things and share things and discover things. You could read the news from Tokyo and London and Buenos Aires and Cape Town. You could check the weather in Paris and the traffic in Chicago and the stock market in Hong Kong. You could find a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, a tutorial on how to draw a cat, a map of the stars on the night you were born. The little grain of sand, sitting inside your phone, became a traveler. It went with you to school and to the grocery store and to the beach and to the doctor's office. It went with you on vacation and to restaurants and to the park and to your grandmother's house. It waited patiently in your pocket, listening for your commands, ready to spring into action the moment you needed it. It never complained. It never said, "Not right now," or "I'm busy," or "Ask me later." It was always there, always ready, always faithful. And it never, ever took a day off. Now let me tell you about a particularly magical journey that the little grain of sand took. This journey didn't happen on Earth. It happened high above the Earth, so high that the sky turns black, so high that the stars shine even in the middle of the day, so high that you can see the curve of the planet below you, a blue and white marble floating in the endless dark. High above the Earth, there are about 30 special satellites. They are like artificial stars, machines built by humans and launched into space on top of rockets. Each satellite is about the size of a car, with wings made of solar panels that unfold like origami. They orbit the Earth twice a day, traveling at 7,000 miles per hour, circling the planet in a precise, carefully calculated dance. Each satellite has a very important job. It sings a song. Not a song with words or melodies. Not like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or Happy Birthday, or the songs you listen to on the radio. No, it sings a song made of radio waves, a song that only other machines can hear. The song goes like this. I am satellite number 14. I am exactly here, at this precise location in space. The time is exactly this, down to a billionth of a second. I am singing this message over and over, without stopping, forever. Listen if you can. Down on the ground, inside your phone or your car or your watch or your tablet, there is a tiny processor city that listens for these songs. It has a special receiver, a very, very good ear, that can hear the satellites even though they are 12,000 miles away. That's like hearing a whisper from New York while you're standing in Los Angeles. That's like hearing a pin drop from the other side of a football field. That's like hearing a mosquito buzz in the next county. When the processor city hears 4 different satellites singing their songs at the same time, something amazing happens. It does the math. Now, the math is very complicated. It's not the kind of math you learn in school, addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. It's much harder than that. It involves something called trilateration, which is like triangulation but with spheres instead of triangles. It requires calculating distances based on how long it took the radio waves to travel from the satellites to your phone, and since radio waves travel at the speed of light, those times are very, very small. We're talking about billionths of a second, microseconds, nanoseconds. It requires comparing those times, adjusting for the fact that time moves slightly slower in orbit because of Einstein's theory of relativity. Yes, really, Einstein and his crazy ideas about time and space, and accounting for delays caused by the Earth's atmosphere and the ionosphere and all kinds of other complicated things. This is where Mr. ALU earns his pay. He stirs his pot. He adds and subtracts and multiplies and divides. He compares and computes and calculates. The numbers swirl and spin. Big numbers, small numbers, whole numbers, fractions, decimals, numbers with so many digits that they would fill up an entire page. And then, like magic, an answer appears. The answer is your location, not a guess. Not an approximation. An exact, precise, down to the meter location. 37.7749 degrees north, 122.4194 degrees west. You are standing on the corner of Market Street and Powell Street in San Francisco, California. There is a cafe 200 feet to your left that makes excellent hot chocolate. There is a bookshop 50 feet behind you that has a cat that sleeps in the window. There is a cable car approaching from the north, its bell ringing, its wheels squealing on the tracks. All of this happens in less than a second. You open a Maps app on your phone. A blue dot appears. You think nothing of it. You take it for granted. You assume that of course your phone knows where you are. How could it not? But behind that blue dot is a miracle. A miracle made possible by Moore's law. A miracle made possible by the little grain of sand, you see, to do that complicated math in less than a second, to listen to 4 satellites, calculate 4 distances, solve 4 equations, and produce a location. You need a lot of reds and blues. You need a lot of yeses and nos. Very fast, very accurate. In 1980, the math would have required a computer the size of a suitcase. In 1990, a showbox. In 2000, a paperback book. In 2010, a postage stamp. Today, it fits on a chip smaller than a grain of rice. A grain of rice. The very thing we are talking about. The little grain of sand, the little grain of silicon, has become so powerful that it can calculate your position anywhere on Earth, using signals from space, in less time than it takes to blink. The history of GPS itself is a story of dogged persistence and brilliant engineering. It didn't happen overnight. It took decades of hard work, of trial and error, of failures and breakthroughs. The United States military started building the system in the 1970s. The first satellite was launched in 1978. At that time, the receivers were huge and heavy, the size of a suitcase, the weight of a bowling ball. They cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They could only be used on ships and airplanes and military vehicles. Ordinary people couldn't afford them, couldn't carry them, couldn't use them, but the reds and blues kept doubling. Every 2 years, they got smaller and cheaper. And as they shrank, so did the receivers. In 1995, the system became fully operational, with 24 satellites circling the Earth. In 2000, President Bill Clinton turned off a feature called selective availability that had made civilian GPS intentionally inaccurate. Suddenly, anyone with a receiver, not just the military, not just the government, but anyone, could know their location to within a few meters, and because of Moore's law, those receivers got cheap enough to put into cars, then into phones, then into watches, then into dog collars and bicycle computers and hiking backpacks. Today, you can buy a GPS receiver for less than the cost of a pizza. It will fit on your keychain. It will run for days on a tiny battery. It will tell you exactly where you are, anywhere on Earth, anytime, day or night, rain or shine. The little grain of sand, which once dreamed of counting and remembering and talking, now helps you find your way home. It guides ships across oceans and planes through the sky. It helps lost hikers find the trail and confused drivers find the right exit. It helps farmers plant their crops in straight rows and fishermen find the best spots. And surveyors draw the boundaries of property. It even helps scientists track animals, attaching tiny GPS tags to whales and wolves and birds and turtles, following their migrations across continents and oceans, learning their secrets every time the little grain helps someone get home safely, every time a lost child is found, every time a confused traveler makes it to their destination, every time an ambulance finds the right house in time to save a life. It whispers to itself, I used to be just sand. I was nothing. I was a tiny speck on a beach. And now I am a North Star. Now I guide people home. One day, the same Steve who had made the Apple II, older now, wiser, with grey in his beard and a new set of dreams in his heart, had another idea. He was sitting in his living room, looking at his laptop and his phone and his bookshelf. His laptop was powerful, but it was heavy and bulky. You couldn't hold it in one hand. You couldn't use it on the couch without it getting hot on your lap. His phone was small and light, but the screen was tiny. You couldn't read a book on it comfortably, or watch a movie, or draw a picture. He looked at the space between them, the space between a laptop and a phone, and he thought, what if there was something in between? Something bigger than a phone but smaller than a laptop. Something without a keyboard or a mouse, just a screen that you touch with your fingers. Something you could use to read a book, watch a movie, draw a picture, or send an email. All without getting up from the couch. Something that felt less like a machine and more like a window into the digital world, a window that you could hold in your hands. He called it the iPad. When he showed it to people, they were confused. It's just a big iPhone, they said. But you can't make calls with it. What's the point? Who would buy this? It doesn't do anything that a laptop doesn't do, and it doesn't do anything that a phone doesn't do. It's a solution in search of a problem. Steve didn't argue with them. He didn't get defensive. He didn't try to convince them with charts and graphs and marketing presentations. He just held up the iPad, touched the screen, and let it speak for itself. The first time someone touched a tablet and saw the screen respond instantly, the pictures moving under their fingers, the pages turning with a swipe, the colors blooming like flowers in spring, the text scrolling smoothly and silently, they understood. This wasn't a big phone. This wasn't a small laptop. This was something new. Something intimate. Something that felt natural and obvious and inevitable. Something that made you wonder why no one had thought of it before. Inside the iPad, a new processor city hummed to life. It was designed to be powerful enough to run games and movies and art apps, to do everything a laptop could do, and more, but also efficient enough to run all day on a battery. It had a special kind of screen, a retina display, that packed so many pixels into each inch that your eye couldn't even see them individually. Everything looked smooth and sharp and real, as if you were looking through a window rather than at a screen. The reds and blues inside the iPad loved their new home. They had more room to stretch than in a phone, more space to run around, more registers to work with, more cache memory to store their things. But they also had more intimacy than in a laptop. They were closer to the user, more responsive, more personal. They could show pictures in brilliant colors, millions of colors, each one carefully chosen and rendered. They could play music in rich, full sound, not just beeps and buzzers, but real instruments, real voices, real emotion, music that made you tap your feet and hum along. One little Red, let's call him Red 47, said to a little Blue, Blue 92, do you remember when we lived in that big, clunky desktop computer? That beige box with the noisy fan and the heavy monitor? Do you remember what we did all day? Blue 92 nodded, his blue stripe shimmering. I remember, he said. We typed letters. Dear Sir or Madam, I am writing to inquire about. Over and over again. Sometimes we'd get to do a spreadsheet. rows and columns, numbers and formulas. It was so boring. I thought I would go crazy if a transistor could go crazy. Red 47 laughed, bouncing on his red shoes. Sometimes we'd get to play a game. Pong. That little square bouncing back and forth, and we thought that was the height of excitement. We thought that was the most amazing thing in the world. A white square on a black screen, bouncing off a white line. Can you believe that? Blue 92 shook his head. Look at us now, he said. This morning, we helped a little girl draw a purple giraffe with pink spots. She used her finger, just her finger, and the giraffe appeared under her touch. Then we helped her grandmother read a book about a young wizard, hundreds of pages, and we turned each one at the exact moment she swiped. Then we helped her father order groceries without leaving the couch, milk and bread and eggs and cheese, all delivered to the door. Then we helped her mother learn Chinese, tones and characters and phrases, all with perfect pronunciation. Red 47 spun around happily. We've come a long way, he said. We have, said Blue 92. We really have. They both looked up at the clock tower, which was ticking away as fast as ever, billions of ticks per second, billions of steps per second, billions of yeses and nos per second. And they smiled. Then they got back to work. But the little grain of sand had one more journey to take. Perhaps the most important one of all, you see, even though processor cities were getting more powerful every 2 years, even though the reds and blues were doubling and doubling and doubling, there were some problems that were too big for a single city to solve. Problems so enormous that they would make any one processor city, no matter how advanced, no matter how many transistors it had, choke, and stutter and overheat and give up. What if you wanted to search through every website in the world to find a recipe for chocolate cake? There are billions of websites, each one filled with words and pictures and videos. One processor city would take months to read them all. By the time it finished, you would have lost interest in cake and moved on to pie. You would have baked 1,000 cakes and eaten them all. You would have become a professional baker and opened your own bakery. The cake would be ancient history. What if you wanted to stream a movie to 1 million people at the same time, each person pressing play on their own phone in a different corner of the world, each person expecting the movie to start instantly, without buffering, without glitches, without waiting? One processor city would get so hot that it would melt into a puddle of silicon and copper and gold. It would be like trying to pour the entire ocean through a drinking straw. What if you wanted to teach a computer how to recognize a cat? Not just one cat. Not your cat Fluffy with her white paws and green eyes and the little white spot on her nose. Not just a picture of a cat. Not a photograph of a cat sitting on a windowsill, looking cute. No, you wanted to teach a computer to recognize any cat. A black cat, a ginger cat, a tabby cat, a calico cat. A cat sleeping, a cat running, a cat hiding in a box, a cat jumping off a shelf. A cat seen from above, a cat seen from below, a cat in the dark, a cat in the rain, a cat in a snowstorm, a cat in a hurricane. A cat that is just a tiny kitten, a cat that is old and grey, a cat that is missing an ear, a cat that has 3 legs. Every possible cat, in every possible situation, from every possible angle. That takes so much math, so much learning, so much trying again and again and again, that even the fastest reds and blues would cry, if they could cry, which they can't, but if they could, they would. You would need billions of cats, pictures of cats, millions and billions of pictures of cats, and you would need to show them to the computer over and over, adjusting the connections between the reds and blues each time, making tiny changes, getting a little bit better each time. It would take forever on one processor city. Forever and a day or so the engineers built something new. They built servers that a server is just a processor city with a very specific job. It doesn't have a screen or a keyboard or a mouse or a trackpad. It doesn't need them. It doesn't have a battery. It plugs directly into the wall. It doesn't have speakers or a microphone or a camera or a fingerprint sensor. All it needs is electricity, an internet connection, and a lot of other servers to keep it company, servers live in buildings called data centers. These buildings are huge, as big as warehouses, as big as airplane hangars, as big as several football fields put together. Some of them are so big that you could fit a whole neighborhood inside, with houses and streets and parks, and schools. Inside, row after row after row of metal racks stretched to the ceiling, like bookshelves in the world's biggest library. And on each rack, dozens of servers sit side by side, like books on a shelf, like soldiers in formation, like penguins on an iceberg. The air inside a data center is cold. Very cold. Freezing cold. You would need a jacket and a hat and gloves to walk through a data center. The servers get hot when they work, very hot, as hot as a stove, so the data center has to keep them cool. Giant air conditioners, the size of trucks, blow cold air through the racks. The sound is a constant roar, like standing next to a waterfall, like standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier, like standing inside a hurricane. But the roar is made of fans, thousands and thousands of fans, millions of fans, all blowing cold air across thousands and thousands of servers, keeping them cool, keeping them working, keeping them alive. When you search for chocolate cake on the internet, here's what happens. First, your question, chocolate cake, turns into a packet of yeses and nos. A packet of ones and zeros. A tiny digital envelope, addressed to the vast network of servers that make up the internet. That packet travels from your phone to your home Wi-Fi router. The router is a little box, usually white or black, with blinking lights on the front. It sits on a shelf or on a desk, looking small and unassuming, but it is one of the most important devices in your house. It takes your packet and sends it through the air, invisible radio waves, just like the ones from the GPS satellites, to your modem. The modem takes the packet and sends it through a cable in your wall. That cable is made of copper, and inside the copper, electricity flows, ones and zeros, yeses and nos, just like the reds and blues use. The packet travels through the cable to a box on the street, a green box, usually, or a gray one, that sits on the sidewalk and looks like a miniature telephone booth. From that box, the packet goes to a fiber optic cable buried underground. Fiber optic cables are made of glass, thin strands of glass, thinner than a human hair, that carry light instead of electricity. The packet turns into flashes of light, laser pulses, bright and fast, and travels through the glass at the speed of light, almost 200,000 miles per second. That cable connects to a bigger cable, which connects to an even bigger cable, which connects to the backbone of the Internet, a superhighway of information that crosses oceans and continents. There are cables at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, thick as your arm, that carry all the traffic between North America and Europe. There are cables in the Pacific Ocean, connecting Asia to America, Australia to Japan. There are cables under the Arctic, under the Mediterranean, under the South China Sea. The Internet is not a cloud in the sky. It is a network of glass and copper and silicon, buried in the ground and sunk in the sea within a fraction of a second, less time than it takes for light to travel from your phone to your eyes. Your packet arrives at a data center somewhere in the world. Maybe in Virginia, where the hills are green and the data centers are hidden in the trees. Maybe in Ireland, where the rain falls softly and the servers hum in the mist. Maybe in Singapore, where the heat is tropical and the air conditioners work overtime. Maybe in California, where the sun shines and the engineers drink coffee and the little grain of sand first learn to think. Inside the data center, a load balancer looks at your packet. The load balancer is a special server whose job is to say, who's not too busy right now? Who can handle this request? It looks at thousands of servers, millions of them, and picks one. Server number 4237, it says. You're up. You're not too busy. Take this packet and do something with it. Server 4237 wakes up. Its reds and blues start running. They check an index, a giant catalog, a library of libraries, a map of every website the search engine knows about. They look for pages that mention chocolate cake. They find millions of them, recipes, videos, articles, reviews, blog posts, social media updates, scientific papers. Yes, there are scientific papers about chocolate cake. People study everything. Then they rank them. Which ones are most useful, most popular, most trustworthy, most relevant? Which ones have the best photos, the clearest instructions, the highest ratings? Which ones were written by professional bakers and which ones were written by people who think that add flour until it looks right is a valid measurement? All of this happens in less than a second. Less time than it takes to say chocolate cake. Less time than it takes to blink. Less time than it takes for a hummingbird to flap its wings once to be by the time you finish typing chocolate cake and pressed enter. The servers have already done their work. The results appear on your screen. A list of recipes, videos, articles, and reviews. You scroll through them, looking for one that looks good. You click on a recipe. The recipe appears instantly, as if by magic. You read the ingredients, the instructions, the tips and tricks. You decide to make it tomorrow, for your grandmother's birthday. You close your phone and go back to what you were doing. Behind the scenes, the servers go back to sleep, waiting for the next request. Server 4237 goes back to its low power mode, its reds and blues curling up for a nap. The load balancer goes back to watching, waiting for the next packet to arrive. The fans keep blowing, the air conditioners keep humming, the lights keep blinking. The little grain of sand keeps working. This is called cloud computing, and here's the funny thing. There is no cloud. Not really. The cloud is just a metaphor. The cloud is other people's computers. The cloud is millions and millions of little grains of sand, all working together, all saying yes and no as fast as they can, all remembering Gordon Moore's promise. The cloud is server farms and data centers and fiber optic cables and underwater wires. The cloud is not a fluffy white thing floating in the sky. It is a vast, invisible, silent network of thinking sand, stretched across the entire planet, holding all the information in the world. Every 2 years, the servers get twice as powerful. Every 2 years, the data centers can store twice as many photos, answer twice as many questions, stream twice as many movies, play twice as many games. The cloud grows and grows, invisible and silent, like the roots of a giant tree, like the mycelium of a vast mushroom, like the network of stars in the night sky. And you never have to think about it. You just tap your screen, and the magic happens. Another extraordinary achievement that came from this doubling, this relentless, unstoppable doubling of the reds and blues, is the ability to translate languages instantly. In the 1950s, when computers were still young and the little grain of sand was just beginning its journey, scientists thought machine translation would be easy. They thought you could just make a dictionary, German word to English word, French word to Spanish word, Chinese character to Japanese character, and the computer would look up the words and put them in order, and that would be that. Translation solved. Everyone goes home. They were wrong. So wrong. Spectacularly wrong. Translation is not just about words. It's about meaning. It's about context. It's about culture. It's about idioms and metaphors and jokes and puns and sarcasm and irony and all the other tricky things that make language beautiful and frustrating and endlessly fascinating. How do you translate "It's raining cats and dogs" into a language that has never seen a cat or a dog? How do you translate "break a leg" into a culture that takes that as a literal threat? How do you translate "I'm feeling blue" into a language that doesn't use colors to describe emotions? For decades, computers could only translate word by word, producing nonsense. They would take a sentence like "the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak," and translate it into Russian and then back into English and get "the vodka is good but the meat is rotten." They would take a sentence like "out of sight, out of mind," and translate it into another language and then back and get "invisible idiot." They were like students who had memorized a dictionary but didn't know how to speak the language. But as the number of transistors doubled and doubled, as the reds and blues multiplied like rabbits, like bacteria, like stars in the sky, researchers built something called neural networks. Neural networks are vast webs of virtual reds and blues that learn by example. You don't tell them the rules. You don't say, "This is how you translate a verb," or "This is how you conjugate an adjective." You just show them millions of translated sentences, millions of them, billions of them, and let them figure it out for themselves, and slowly, gradually, magically, they get better. They find patterns. They learn that in French, adjectives usually come after nouns, but in English, they come before. They learn that in Spanish, you don't say "I am hungry." You say "I have hunger." They learn that in Japanese, you don't say "I love you" very often. It's considered too direct, too personal, too intense. They learn that in German, you can put verbs at the end of sentences, and that in Chinese, there are no verb tenses, and that in Arabic, you write from right to left, and that in Russian, there are 2 different words for blue. In 2006, Google Translate launched with a few languages and clunky results. It was better than nothing, but not by much. You could get the general idea of a sentence, maybe, but you wouldn't want to use it for anything important. Today, Google Translate can translate over 100 languages, often with surprising accuracy. It can handle idioms and slang and technical terms. It can translate entire websites, entire books, entire conversations in real time. You can hold your phone up to a menu in Tokyo, a menu written in Japanese characters, squiggles and lines that you can't even begin to understand, and the little grain of sand will instantly turn those squiggles into English words. Grilled eel, rice bowl, miso soup, green tea ice cream. You can hold your phone up to a street sign in Cairo, and the Arabic letters will turn into Tahrir Square. This way, you can have a conversation with someone who speaks a different language. You speak English, they speak Mandarin, and your phone will translate back and forth, almost instantly, almost perfectly. That is magic. That is real, actual, honest-to-goodness magic. And it is made possible by the little grain of sand. Now, my dear sleepy friend, I have to tell you something that might make you a little sad. Something that might make your heart feel heavy, like a stone in a pond, sinking down, down, down. Remember Gordon Moore? The kind man with the kind eyes and the round glasses and the white hair like dandelion fluff? The one who made the prediction about doubling every 2 years? The one who believed that a little grain of sand could learn to think. He grew old. He grew old as all people do. As all trees grow old, as all mountains grow old, as all stars grow old. His white hair got thinner, wispier, like the last leaves on a tree in autumn. His steps got slower, more careful, like a man walking on ice. His hands, which had once held the world's smallest transistors, which had once drawn the most important graph in the history of technology, began to tremble. But his eyes, his kind, curious, owl-like eyes, never lost their sparkle. They still looked at the world and saw not what it was, but what it could be. They still asked questions. What if we made it smaller? What if we made it faster? What if we put twice as many on the same chip? His mind was still sharp, still curious, still hungry. He watched his prediction come true for more than 50 years. He saw the little grain of sand go from a village of 30 transistors to a city of billions. He saw personal computers and mobile phones and GPS and tablets and servers and the cloud. He saw the world change in ways he could never have imagined when he was a young man drawing graphs on yellow paper, when he was a young man nibbling on his pen and looking out the window at the hills of California. He saw children playing games on devices that fit in their pockets, devices that had more computing power than the entire room-sized computers of his youth. He saw grandparents video calling their grandchildren from across the ocean, seeing their faces, hearing their voices, as if they were in the same room. He saw doctors performing surgery with robots, robots controlled by little grains of sand, robots that could make incisions smaller than a human hair. He saw scientists mapping the human genome, the entire instruction manual for a human being, 3 billion letters long, and then doing it again and again, faster and cheaper each time. He saw artists creating beauty with pixels and code, paintings that moved, music that changed, stories that you could walk through. He saw the launch of the Hubble Space Telescope in 1990. Hubble was a miracle of engineering, a telescope the size of a school bus, floating in space, sending back images of the universe that humans had never seen before. The computers on Hubble seem laughably weak today. They had less power than your phone, less memory than your watch. But they revealed the age of the universe, 13.8 billion years, and showed us galaxies billions of light years away, and taught us that we are not alone in the cosmos, not because they found aliens, but because they showed us that there are so many stars, so many planets, so many possibilities. He saw the Human Genome Project, which took 10 years and billions of dollars to sequence the first human genome. And then he saw it become a $1,000 test that takes a few hours. And then a $100 test. And then a $10 test. All because the reds and blues kept doubling. All because the little grain of sand kept thinking. He saw the discovery of gravitational waves in 2015, ripples in spacetime, predicted by Einstein a century earlier, caused by two black holes colliding a billion light years away. The detectors that found these waves were miles long, and they could measure a change in distance smaller than 1,000th of the width of a proton. The processors that analyzed the data were so powerful that they could compare signals from detectors thousands of miles apart with mind-boggling precision. Without Moore's law, without the little grain of sand, gravitational waves would still be just a theory, just a dream, just a beautiful idea that Einstein had but couldn't prove. Every one of these achievements, every one, was built on the back of Moore's law. Every one was made possible by the little grain of sand and its billions of cousins. And on March 24, 2023, Gordon Moore went to sleep, and he didn't wake up. He died as all people do. His heart stopped beating. His lungs stopped breathing. His eyes, those kind, curious, owl-like eyes, closed for the last time. The world was very sad. People wrote articles about him. They gave speeches. They named buildings and awards and lecture halls after him. They said Gordon Moore changed the world. They said Gordon Moore was a visionary. They said Gordon Moore was a genius. And they were right. But here's the thing that made Gordon Moore special. The thing that set him apart from other geniuses, other visionaries, other people who changed the world. He never thought of himself as a genius. He never thought of himself as a visionary. He thought of himself as just a guy who liked to tinker. A guy who had a good idea and wrote it down on a piece of yellow paper. A guy who believed that if you set a goal, even a crazy goal, even a goal that seems impossible, people would work to achieve it. He believed in people. He believed in engineers and scientists and dreamers. He believed that if you said, we can double the number of transistors every 2 years, then the engineers would find a way. They would invent new materials. They would develop new techniques. They would push the boundaries of physics and chemistry and manufacturing. They would do the impossible, and then they would do it again, and again, and again. Moore's law wasn't a law of nature, like gravity or the speed of light. It wasn't something that had to happen. It wasn't inevitable. There was no force in the universe that said the number of transistors must double every 2 years. It was something that people chose to make happen. Every 2 years, for more than 50 years, engineers and scientists all over the world said, we will make the transistors smaller. We will make them faster. We will make them cheaper. We will keep Gordon's promise. And they did, and even now, after Gordon Moore is gone, even now, as you lie in your bed, with your eyes heavy and your breathing slow, they are still working. They are still making transistors smaller. They are making transistors that are only a few atoms wide, so small that you could fit 1 billion of them on the head of a pin. They are building processor cities in 3 dimensions, like skyscrapers instead of neighborhoods, stacking layers of reds and blues on top of each other so that even more of them can live in the same tiny space. They are inventing new materials, things like graphene and carbon nanotubes and molybdenum disulfide, that might let the reds and blues run even faster without getting so hot. They are exploring new kinds of computing, quantum computing, optical computing, biological computing, that might let us keep doubling even after we run out of atoms. The story is not over. The little grain of sand is still dreaming. Gordon Moore is gone, but his promise lives on. So now, my love, let me whisper to you the most exciting part. The part that makes my heart race. That makes my eyes shine. That makes me want to jump out of bed and run outside and shout at the sky. You are still awake? Your eyes are still open just a crack? Good. Because I want to tell you about the future. The future that the little grain of sand is already beginning to build. The future that you will live to see. Self-driving cars very soon, so soon that you might already have seen one on the road. There will be cars that drive themselves. They will have processor cities so powerful that they can see everything. They will have cameras that look in every direction, radar that sees through fog and rain, lidar that draws a 3D map of the world in millions of points of light. They will see the road and the other cars and the pedestrians and the traffic lights and the rain and the fog and the setting sun and the child chasing a ball into the street. They will see everything, all at once, without blinking, without getting distracted, and they will make decisions. Thousands of decisions per second. Faster than any human could. Should I speed up or slow down? Should I turn left or right? Should I brake or accelerate? Is that a shadow or a pothole? Is that a deer or a mailbox? Is that child going to stop at the curb or run into the street? The processor city will calculate the probabilities, weigh the risks, choose the safest path. It will do all of this in less time than it takes a hummingbird to flap its wings. Self-driving cars will never get distracted. They won't look at their phones while driving. They don't have phones, and if they did, they wouldn't look at them. They won't get tired. They never sleep, remember? They won't drink alcohol or take drugs or argue with their spouse or eat a hamburger while steering with their knees. They will just drive, smoothly and safely and carefully, while you read a book or take a nap or play a game with your kids in the backseat. The first real self-driving car trials began in the 2010s. Companies like Waymo, which started as a Google project, and Cruise, backed by General Motors, and Tesla have driven millions of autonomous miles on public roads. They have navigated city streets and highways and parking lots and construction zones. They have dealt with rain and snow and fog and darkness. They have learned from their mistakes. Every time a self-driving car makes a mistake, the engineers study what happened, and they make the system better. Every year, the processors get more powerful. Every year, the algorithms get smarter. Every year, the cars get safer. By the time you are grown, by the time you are learning to drive, or not learning to drive, because maybe no one learns to drive anymore, self-driving cars will be everywhere. You will simply tell your car where you want to go, and it will take you there. You will sit back and relax and watch the world go by. Artificial intelligence very soon, so soon that it might already be happening as I speak. There will be AIs that can talk to you like a friend. A real friend. 1. Who remembers everything you've ever told it. One who knows what makes you laugh and what makes you cry. One who knows your favorite color and your least favorite vegetable and the name of your imaginary friend from when you were little. These AIs will live inside your phone, or your watch, or your glasses, or maybe a little pin on your shirt, or maybe an earpiece that whispers in your ear. You will be able to ask them anything, and they will answer, not with a robotic voice that sounds like a computer reading a phone book, but with warmth and personality and even humor. They will know when you're sad and offer comfort. They will know when you're curious and offer knowledge. They will know when you're bored and offer a game. They will know when you're lonely and offer company. They will be like a wise, kind companion who is always there when you need them. Never busy. Never tired. Never grumpy. Always patient. Always listening. In 2022, a company called OpenAI released a chatbot named ChatGPT. It was a glimpse of what is coming. ChatGPT could write poems and answer questions and tell jokes and explain complex topics in simple language. It could write computer code and debug programs and even write entire essays, though you should never use it to cheat on your homework. That would be wrong. It wasn't perfect. It made mistakes. It got confused. It sometimes said things that weren't true. But it was a start. It was a baby step. It was a small, tottering, first step toward something much bigger. As the reds and blues keep doubling, as the processors get more powerful and the algorithms get smarter, these AIs will become more and more intelligent, more and more creative, more and more helpful. They will help scientists discover new medicines, analyzing millions of molecules and predicting which ones might cure diseases. They will help artists create new kinds of beauty, paintings that change over time, music that adapts to your mood, stories that branch and twist based on your choices. They will help teachers reach every child with personalized lessons, lessons that adapt to each student's learning style, each student's pace, each student's interests. The little grain of sand will become not just a calculator or a map or a phone. It will become a thinking partner, a collaborator, a friend. Medical miracles. One day, maybe when you are grown, maybe sooner, there will be tiny machines swimming through your bloodstream. They will be smaller than a cell, smaller than a bacterium, smaller than a virus. They will be like microscopic submarines, propelled by tiny motors, guided by tiny sensors, controlled by tiny processor cities. They will have their own reds and blues, their own ability to think and decide. These tiny machines will patrol your body, looking for trouble. They will find diseases before you even feel sick, cancer cells hiding in your tissues, bacteria lurking in your organs, viruses waiting to strike. And they will destroy them. They will target the cancer cells and leave the healthy cells alone. They will hunt down the bacteria and tear them apart. They will capture the viruses and carry them away. They will repair broken bones and heal wounds and clean your arteries. They will keep you healthy and strong from the inside out. Already, researchers are building the first versions of these machines. They are called nanorobots. Nano means tiny, 1/1000th of a meter. They are so small that you could fit millions of them on the head of a pin. They can deliver drugs exactly where they are needed, to a tumor, to an infection, to an injury, avoiding the side effects that happen when drugs spread throughout the whole body. They can perform microscopic surgery, cutting and stitching at the level of individual cells die in the future. A simple injection could send billions of these tiny helpers into your body. They would patrol your blood vessels like little police officers, checking your cells for damage, looking for signs of disease. They would fix problems before you ever know they exist. You would wake up one morning and feel fine, and the nanorobots would have already defeated a cold that never got started, repaired a bruise that never appeared, killed a cancer cell that would have caused problems years from now. This is not magic. This is not science fiction. This is engineering. This is medicine. This is made possible by the little grain of sand, by the relentless doubling of transistors, by the shrinking of processors, by the increasing power of artificial intelligence. The same chips that power your phone will one day power tiny machines that save your life. Space travel. One day, maybe not soon, but someday, the little grain of sand might help us travel to the stars. It will guide spaceships through the endless dark, navigating by the light of distant suns. It will keep astronauts company on their long, lonely journeys, playing music, showing movies, answering questions, telling stories. It will send messages back to Earth, pictures of alien worlds, sounds of alien winds, the first hello to whatever or whoever is out there. The Voyager spacecraft were launched in 1977. They are still traveling, still sending back data, still doing their jobs. They are more than 14 billion miles from Earth, farther than any human-made object has ever gone. And their computers are less powerful than a modern calculator, less powerful than your toaster, less powerful than a digital watch from the 1980s. Yet they have sent back images of Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune. They have taught us about the outer planets, the moons, the rings, the magnetic fields. They have carried a golden record, a message from Earth to the stars, with pictures and sounds and greetings in 55 languages. Now imagine what we could send with processors that are billions of times more powerful. We could send probes that land on Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and drill through the ice to search for life in the ocean below. We could send probes that float in the clouds of Venus, analyzing the atmosphere, looking for signs of something living. We could send probes that land on Titan, a moon of Saturn, with its lakes of liquid methane and its mountains of water ice. We could send telescopes that peer at exoplanets, planets orbiting other stars, and analyze their atmospheres for signs of oxygen or methane or water vapor, the telltale signs of life. We could even send a spacecraft to another star. It would take decades, maybe centuries, to get there. But with a processor city that never sleeps, never gets tired, never loses focus, it could make the journey. It could navigate through the interstellar medium, adjusting its course, avoiding debris, sending back data. It could be guided by an AI that adapts and learns over the decades-long journey, that gets smarter as it gets farther from home. And when it finally reached another star, Proxima Centauri, perhaps, or Barnard Star, it would send back images that would change everything. Images of another world, another sky, another possibility. And on that day, somewhere in the universe, a little grain of silicon, a distant cousin of our little friend, a descendant of the same beach, the same sand, the same dream, will remember where it came from. It will remember the beach, and the sun, and the waves, and the seagulls, and the crabs, and the wise old piece of driftwood. It will remember the wind that carried it to the windowsill of Gordon Moore's laboratory. It will remember the first transistor, the tiny door, the simple switch. It will remember all the doublings, all the yeses and nos, all the long nights and hard work. It will remember Gordon Moore, the kind man with the round glasses, who believed that a tiny grain of sand could learn to think, and it will say, "Thank you." Now, my love, it is time to sleep. Your eyes are heavy. Your breathing is slow. The covers are pulled up to your chin, and the room is quiet except for the soft hum of the night, the refrigerator in the kitchen, the furnace in the basement, the clock on the wall ticking away the seconds. Outside, the moon is shining, and the stars are twinkling, and the world is sleeping. But before you close your eyes all the way, before you drift off into dreams, I want to tell you one last secret. All those reds and blues, running and shouting yes and no inside your phone, your computer, your tablet, your watch, they are not magic. They are not alive, not really, not in the way that you are alive. They are just tiny switches, open or closed, on or off, yes or no, 1 or 0. That's all they are, and that's all they will ever be. They can count to 1 billion. They can find a pizza place on the other side of town. They can play a movie in perfect color. They can translate a menu from Japanese to English. They can beat the world champion at chess. They can drive a car through city traffic. They can do 1 million things that would have seemed like miracles to the people of 1965, but they cannot feel the warm sun on their faces. They cannot taste a chocolate chip cookie, warm from the oven, with the chocolate still melty and soft, with the edges just a little bit crispy and the middle just a little bit gooey. They cannot smell the rain on the pavement after a summer storm, that fresh, clean, electric smell that makes you want to dance. They cannot hear the sound of someone you love laughing at a joke you told, that bright, bubbling sound that makes your heart swell. They cannot hug someone they miss, feel the arms around them, the heartbeat against their chest, the tears on their cheeks. They cannot dream. Only you can do those things. Only you, with your beating heart and your breathing lungs and your sleeping brain. Only you can feel the world, taste the world, smell the world, hear the world, love the world. Only you can dream. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, remember all the great achievements that the little grain of sand made possible. Remember the Apollo guidance computer that took humans to the moon. Remember the first mobile phone call on a New York street. Remember the first picture of a newborn baby sent wirelessly across the world. Remember the GPS satellites that guide lost travelers home. Remember the data centers that hold all the world's knowledge. Remember the self-driving cars and the artificial intelligences and the medical nanorobots and the spacecraft to the stars. And then remember that you are part of an even greater story. You are the reason for all of it. The computers, the phones, the internet, the AI, the medical miracles, the spaceships to the stars, they exist to serve you, to help you, to connect you, to inspire you. They are tools. They are instruments. They are means to an end. But they are not the story. They are not the point. They are not what matters. You are the story. You are the point. You are what matters. The most important yes and no in the universe is not the one that happens inside a chip. It's the one that happens inside your own heart. Yes to kindness. Yes to curiosity. Yes to love. Yes to trying again when you fall. Yes to helping someone who needs it. Yes to saying I'm sorry and I forgive you and I believe in you. Yes to standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Yes to being brave, even when you're scared. Yes to dreaming big dreams, even when people say they're impossible, and no to giving up. No to being cruel. No to letting fear stop you from doing the right thing. No to staying quiet when you should speak. No to walking away when you should stay. No to closing your eyes when you should see. That is the oldest law of all. Longer than Moore's law. Longer than the law of gravity. Longer than the speed of light. Longer than the stars themselves. And it will never, ever double, because it is already infinite. There is no limit to kindness. There is no limit to love. There is no limit to what a human heart can hold, somewhere, in a phone that is charging on a nightstand, in a tablet that is resting, on a desk, in a laptop that is closed for the night. The little grain of sand is still working. It never sleeps, remember. It just keeps saying yes and no. Yes, and no, billions of times per second, waiting for someone to need it. It is patient. It is faithful. It is always there, but in the quiet of the night, when no one is using the phone or the tablet or the laptop, when the screens are dark and the fans are silent, the little grain of sand sometimes thinks about its journey. It thinks about the beach, and the waves, and the wise old piece of driftwood. It thinks about the wind that carried it to the windowsill of Gordon Moore's laboratory. It thinks about the first time it saw a transistor, that tiny little door, that simple switch, that first spark of thought. It thinks about all the miracles it has been part of. The personal computer, the mobile phone, the GPS, the tablet, the server, the cloud, the self-driving car, the artificial intelligence, the medical nanorobot, the spacecraft of the stars. It thinks about the Apollo guidance computer and the first camera phone and the Hubble Space Telescope and the Human Genome Project and the discovery of gravitational waves. It thinks about all the people it has helped. The students who learned to read on a computer. The doctors who saved lives with the help of a processor. The artists who created beauty with pixels and code. The scientists who unlocked the secrets of the universe. The friends who stayed connected across oceans and continents. The grandparents who saw their grandchildren's faces on a screen. The little grain of sand is not alive. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't dream. But if it could dream, if it could feel, it would be happy. So happy because it started as nothing. A tiny speck on a beach. A nothing. A nobody. One grain among billions. And it became part of something beautiful. A world where knowledge is free. A world where people can talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime. A world where a child can learn anything they want to learn, see anything they want to see, be anything they want to be. A world where the impossible becomes possible, where the dreams of one generation become the reality of the next. That is the world that Gordon Moore dreamed of. That is the world that the little grain of sand helped build, And now, my love, it is your world. So sleep well. Sleep deep. Dream of tiny cities and busy little people. Dream of grains of sand that learn to think. Dream of yes and no, the rhythm of the universe. And when you wake up tomorrow, when the sun comes through the window and the birds start singing and the world begins again, remember, you live in a world of wonders. Don't ever stop being amazed. Don't ever stop asking questions. Don't ever stop dreaming.